Have you ever had one of those days where you were busy the entire time and still avoided the one thing that actually mattered most? You answered emails, checked things off, organized something, cleaned something, maybe you even did tasks that were not on your list at all but suddenly felt important. And at the end of the day, you felt that same strange mix of emotions: tired, vaguely accomplished, and still stuck because you were busy but you didn't move. That pattern has a name. It's what I call productive procrastination. When you do a lot of things, sometimes even useful things, to avoid the harder, more important, more uncomfortable thing. And that's what makes it so deceptive. It doesn't look like procrastination. It looks like responsibility. It looks like productivity. But very often, it's really avoidance. Because the subconscious would rather give you the relief of action than the risk of the real action. Most people think procrastination means doing nothing. But one of the most dangerous forms of procrastination is not inactivity, it's activity in all the wrong places. It's movement without meaningful movement. And that's why so many smart, capable, ambitious people get trapped in it. Very often, productive procrastination is not a time management problem. It's not just poor discipline. It's often subconscious avoidance. It's the mind trying to protect you from the discomfort attached to the real task, while still allowing you to feel useful. That's the key distinction, because the hard task is rarely hard only because of the task itself. Usually it's hard because of what the task represents. Maybe it involves visibility, maybe judgment, maybe rejection or uncertainty, maybe the possibility of failure, maybe the possibility of success. Maybe it would force a decision. Maybe it would expose you to feedback. Maybe it would move you out of preparation and into reality. That is where the subconscious gets involved. The subconscious is always oriented towards safety, familiarity, and the preservation of what feels known. It wants the familiar terrain. It wants the version of life where the stakes feel manageable and your identity stays intact. So when a task threatens that stability, the system doesn't always say, "Don't do it." Usually it's more subtle than that. It says, "Do this other thing first." And that's where the trap begins. Instead of making the sales call, you answer easy emails. Instead of recording the video, you reorganize your workspace. Instead of publishing the offer, you tweak the branding. Instead of writing the page, you research 3 new tools. Instead of making the hard decision, you suddenly become very committed to cleaning the house, sorting folders, renaming files, updating notes, or handling some minor task that has somehow become urgent. And because these things are not pointless, you can justify them. That's what makes the pattern so convincing. You're not doing nothing. You're doing things that technically matter. They just don't matter the most. And often that is enough for the subconscious to keep you in a strangely comfortable loop. You get the relief of action. You get the identity of being responsible. You avoid the discomfort of the real work. But the cost is high. The cost isn't just delayed progress. The cost is what that delay teaches you about yourself. Every time you keep doing everything except the thing that matters, you reinforce a pattern. You teach yourself that when friction appears, you drift. You teach yourself that safer tasks win. You teach yourself that motion is enough, even when it isn't. And over time, that erodes self-trust. This is one of the hidden reasons ambitious people can feel so frustrated with themselves. They're not inactive enough to call themselves lazy, but they're not honest enough about the avoidance to call it what it is. So they live in this exhausting middle ground where they're constantly doing things, but rarely touching the task that would actually create the breakthrough. That's not just inefficient, it's demoralizing. Deep down, most people know. They know when they are doing the real work, and they know when they're circling it. They know when they're moving something important, and they know when they're decorating the edges of their life instead of changing it. And one reason this matters so much is that the real work is usually not just practically important, it's psychologically important. The call you've been avoiding may force you to become more visible. The offer you haven't launched yet may force you to find out whether people actually want what you created. The conversation you keep postponing may change a relationship dynamic you've learned to live inside. The content you haven't published may require you to be seen more clearly than feels comfortable. The application you haven't submitted, the pitch you haven't sent, the boundary you have not set, the decision you haven't made. These things often carry identity weight. And identity friction is one of the deepest drivers of avoidance. Because the subconscious doesn't only fear pain, it also resists transformation when transformation feels unfamiliar. That's why productive procrastination is so common among thoughtful, intelligent, high-functioning people. It gives the system a compromise. I will let you feel busy as long as you don't do the things that really change the game. That compromise can feel reasonable for a while, until one day you realize you've spent a shocking amount of time being active without being brave. That's a hard realization, but it's also a useful one. Once you see the pattern, you can stop moralizing it and start understanding it. Not shame, clarity. Not what's wrong with me, but what am I avoiding and what discomfort is attached to it? That question changes everything, because now you're not just looking at your calendar or your to-do list. You're looking at your nervous system, your identity, your subconscious definition of safety. You are asking why the lower stakes task feels easier to move toward than the higher stakes one. You're asking what the real work threatens. You're asking what version of yourself the important task requires, and whether some deeper part of you is still resisting becoming that person. So what do you do with this? First, learn to distinguish real work from relief work. Real work meaningfully moves the bigger goal forward. Relief work reduces tension without requiring courage. Relief work is not always bad. Some of it needs to get done. But when relief work becomes your default move at the exact moment real work becomes uncomfortable, that is avoidance. Second, when you notice yourself drifting into lower value tasks, ask one simple question. What am I not doing right now? Usually, you already know. Usually, the avoided task is sitting quietly in the background the whole time. Third, name the discomfort honestly. What exactly makes the important task uncomfortable? Is it uncertainty, exposure, perfectionism, a fear of being judged, a fear of being ignored, of getting it wrong, a fear that if you really try, you will find out something painful, or even a fear that if you succeed, life will start demanding a bigger version of you than feels comfortable right now? Once you name the discomfort, the pattern gets less foggy. Fourth, shrink the emotional leap. Don't tell yourself you have to finish the whole thing. Just begin the thing. Write the paragraph, record the first minute, draft the first message, open the page, outline the email. Start where the resistance is real, but the threshold is small enough to cross. Momentum is much easier to build once you stop orbiting the work and you actually touch it. And fifth, pay attention to the identity story beneath the behavior. If productive procrastination is a recurring pattern, the deeper issue is probably not your planner. It's likely that some part of you still feels safer being the person who is preparing, refining, organizing, and getting ready than being the person who is exposed, decisive, visible, and fully in the arena. That is subconscious, and that's why better systems alone don't always solve this. Systems matter, structure matters, but if the deeper issue is that your subconscious is trying to protect you from the emotional consequences of meaningful action, then no planner in the world will fully solve what is fundamentally a safety pattern. Eventually, if you want to stop circling and start moving, you have to become someone who can tolerate the discomfort of meaningful action without reflexively escaping into safer motion. You have to get better at recognizing the false comfort of low-stakes productivity and more honest about the difference between doing things and doing the thing. So if you've been feeling busy, useful, active, and maybe even exhausted, but still strangely stuck, it's worth asking whether you're truly overwhelmed or whether some part of you is using productivity to avoid the emotional risk of what matters most. Because once you see productive procrastination for what it is, it becomes much harder to confuse motion with progress. And that's when you can start making different choices. Not perfect ones, not fearless ones, but truer ones. The work that changes your life is usually not the work that keeps you comfortably occupied. It's the work that asks something of you. It stretches your identity. It raises the stakes. It exposes you. And because of that, it will often be the very work your subconscious tries hardest to keep you away from. Which means this: the presence of resistance isn't always a sign that the task is wrong. Very often, it's a sign it's the task that matters. If that hits home and you want to understand the deeper subconscious patterns behind avoidance, self-sabotage, and being stuck, check out the Subconscious Starter Kit. It includes a free training to help you better understand the hidden patterns behind why you do what you do, foundational videos on the subconscious and hypnosis, and the Sanctuary Session, which is a guided hypnosis audio track designed to help you settle your system and reconnect with a calmer internal state. Sometimes the thing keeping you stuck isn't laziness. It's protection. And once you understand what your system is protecting you from, you can start changing the pattern. Breakthroughs begin within. Bye for now.